Lakers are 17-4 since November 30th. The Lakers are back in action tonight. They're at home against Dallas. The Lakers are trying to get back to 500. They're one game below. The Chargers are going to have some competition in trying to hire Jim Harbaugh as their next head coach. Harbaugh interviewed with Atlanta on Tuesday. At the moment, 5 other NFL teams are looking for a head coach. The Raiders, Carolina, Washington, Tennessee, and Seattle. Harbaugh's phone is expected to keep on ringing. No debates, no speculation, just the info you need. That's your KBLA Sports Minute. I'm Ray Richardson. More news, opinions, and conversation when we come forward on KBLA Talk 1580.
Climate is king.
At KBLA Talk 1580, we believe that caring for the community means caring about the climate. You might have heard that we announced a pretty bold 12-month, $2 million campaign to do 4 things. Increase climate literacy, turn up the volume on communities of color in the climate conversation, connect everyday people with the resources they need to survive and thrive, and highlight frontline climate justice crusaders of color throughout this year. KBLA Talk 1580 will be bringing you insightful interviews on all of our shows to help raise your climate IQ. Each quarter this year, we will also be hosting free climate events in various communities throughout the city with food, fun, and forward-thinking conversations. Thanks to partners like LADWP, Metro, Caltrans, the Sierra Club, the California Community Foundation, the California Endowment, AQMD, MWD, and more. You'll also be hearing more about a couple of national town halls broadcasting live from Los Angeles, to which you will be invited. And we'll be rolling out a robust social media campaign on all our platforms, as well as an outdoor media campaign, all designed to educate, enlighten, and empower you in our fight for climate justice.
We want cleaner air.
Caring about the community means caring about the climate. At KBLA Talk 1580, we believe that we really can change the world if we care enough. 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 If we care enough.
1, 2, 3, go! Ha ha! I'm gonna try to keep it coming. Things ain't always smooth, but I'll be alright as long as I can find the groove. Yes, I will. Somehow I know that I can make it. You seem to like my style. Don't you worry, I'm gonna be around a while. Yes, I will. I'm just happy to see you talk to me back in style again.
Live from historic Leimert Park in Los Angeles, California, I'm Tavis Smiley, and I'm so glad to see you and me back in stride again. Before we get started with today's show, let me invite you to follow me on Facebook and Instagram at The Real Tavis Smiley and get updates on X, that's formerly Twitter, at Tavis Smiley. By the way, should you miss any part of today's program or want to catch up on previous shows, you can always visit thetavisSmileyShow.com. That's thetavisSmileyShow.com or wherever you get your podcast, and listen to the Tavis Smiley podcast version of this program at your leisure. Another great show on tap for you today. In our second hour, USA Today columnist and the founder of Braver Angels, John Wood Jr., joins us for a conversation about efforts by both conservative activist Charlie Kirk and billionaire hedge fund manager Bill Ackman to demean and discredit Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. by casting aspersion on his work and his witness. What's up with all the hate on Dr. King? We'll talk about it with John Wood Jr. in hour 2. In our third hour, a conversation with yoga expert Shahada Karim on holistic wellness. We will meet Shahada at the intersection of culture and diet in hour 3 and see if we can find a path to healthier lifestyles this year. But we commence today's show talking politics with former 2024 GOP presidential candidate, former member of Congress, and former CIA clandestine officer Will Hurd. Mr. Hurd, how are you today, sir?
Tavis, I'm doing great, man. It's a pleasure to be on your show.
It's an honor to have you on. Thank you for the time. Glad we have an hour, a whole lot to talk about. I don't often get a chance to talk to Black Republicans, and when I do, I am fascinated by the dialogue.
I'm a good one. I'm a good Black Republican.
All right.
Okay, we got to make that distinction.
Let me start with that. What is, to your mind? I'll follow you all hour long. What is a good Black Republican, Will Hurd?
Look, one of the things that I try to talk to people about, what is the GOP? It's bigger than just Donald Trump. It's bigger than just the, senior elected officials. It's people that are willing to vote for a Republican, and that's the way I define that. And for me, I'm a Republican because I do think that the private sector has an opportunity to help people move people up the economic ladder. I believe in a strong foreign policy that America has become an accessible nation, not because of what we have taken, but because of what we have given, not only example of how to be a democracy, but helping our friends and allies around the world. And so these are the topics that I try to talk about, and one of the reasons why I've been a Republican for most of my life.
I appreciate that list. We'll interrogate that as we move through the hour. Let me ask a couple other broad questions, Will, and then we'll jump through this hour. How, to your mind, do Black Republicans writ large, not just Will Hurd, but how do Black Republicans across the board fit or not fit so neatly into this version of the GOP?
Sure, and again, I think when you say this version of the GOP, I think it's a GOP dominant. You're talking about a GOP dominated.
This is Donald Trump's party right now. You and I both know it. Yeah.
Yeah, no, we know that, and again, so how do we fit in? It's fascinating. There was about a year and a half ago, I read a book. I'm going to butcher the title, but it was, something like The Tragedy of the Black Republican. And it talked about how, going all the way back to the 1950s, how very senior, well-known figures within the Black community were part of the Republican Party. Jackie Robinson was a Republican. And so I think where we fit, the reality is, like, it's what's the old skit. I think it was a Key and Peele skit, about Black Republicans. We're not a monolith, right? And I would agree with that. But I think when it comes to the economic message of the Republican Party, that Black and brown people fit squarely within that. How do you have an opportunity, the best chance to build a business, grow your business, right? To benefit from retirement, from a strong and robust stock market. These are all things that Black folks, we should all care about, just like folks from other parts of the community. I think the problem is, the debates. I think Ron DeSantis was the most recent example of it was slavery a jobs program, right? Slavery was not a jobs program, period, full stop. And the fact that story continued when it was very simple to be like, hey, let's clarify that language in the code. They were changing how kids in school were going to learn about slavery, right? There were some benefits of slavery. And so I think these continued debates is what hurts the GOP in Black communities. And again, I'm not, I don't dismiss any of that stuff. Right. All that stuff is real. But there's plenty of us that actually don't believe and try to fight against them.
And see, when we come forward, I want to debate that, because to your words, and I think words matter, Will, I don't think there are debates about that. I think there's an ideology that is pervasive inside this party. You give the example of Ron DeSantis and slavery as a jobs program. There's also Nikki Haley. They're the last two standing, basically. There's Nikki Haley and her refusal to even say that the Civil War was fought over slavery. So it's not just a debate. This is an ideology. And again, there are a number of candidates who espouse these views. I'm just getting started. Lots to talk about with the former GOP presidential candidate this time around, former Congressman Will Hurd, on Tavis Smiley.
Hope, agency, dignity. This is Tavis Smiley.
Can you dig it? Come on!
What is dedication?
My biggest fear in the middle of my addiction was that my kids wouldn't have a father.
And I started thinking, you know what? This isn't my story. I definitely had to become a better man to be a better father. It's important to me that my kids are empowered and truly believe that if they can think it, they can do it.
That's dedication. Visit fatherhood.gov to hear more. Brought to you by the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services and the Ad Council.
Joey from Vermont, a farmer trying to get through the winter. Adriana from South Carolina, a single mother living paycheck to paycheck. Liam from Ohio, an injured father struggling to provide for his family. Hi, I'm Shanola Hampton, and I support the Feeding America network of food banks because they help provide over 6 billion meals to people in need each year. Learn more at feedingamerica.org.
At KBLA Talk 1580, we do Black history every single day. In fact, as the only Black talk radio station west of the Mississippi, we are Black history. Our annual Black History Month luncheon is fast approaching, and we want to be sure to give you ample time to get your company, organization, church, or group to join us at this year's celebration on the last day of the month, Thursday, February 29th at noon. Last year, we honored iconic local Black media personalities, including Pat Harvey, Jim Hill, Mark Brown, Beverly White, Sandy Banks, and Pat Prescott, and raised $20,000 in scholarships. This year, we're honoring Black Hollywood creatives who have used their artistic genius as climate justice champions. At this year's luncheon, we will be showcasing and sharing their inspiring work on our big screen. Plus, a scrumptious meal, live music, great company, and lots of fun with your favorite KBLA Talk 1580 hosts. So contact us today at info@smileyaudio.media.com or call 323-290-4690. That's info@smileyaudio.media.com or call 323-290-4690. We hope to see you Thursday, February 29th as we close out Black History Month. At KBLA Talk 1580, we've got your Black.
The first time I tried to quit vaping, I told myself that it was like a mountain that I had to climb over. And once I got to the other side, it would be clear. But I couldn't make it over. What really got me to quit was my little sister. I saw her vaping. So I was back in the mountain, but this time, she was up there with me. It's weird what you can do for others that you won't do for yourself.
Every attempt is part of your story to quit for good. Visit Kick It California today at kickitca.org.
Made fresh daily in the Mert Park, Los Angeles, California. You're listening to Tavis Smiley.
Tavis Smiley and Will Hurd, who I'm delighted to have as our guest, kicking off today's program, former U.S. Congressman, former GOP presidential candidate. We've been just getting started in this conversation, really about black folk in the GOP. We'll cover a lot more ground in this particular hour. But Will, back to this point you were making a moment ago about these debates inside the GOP. I don't really see them so much as debates. When you think about the stuff that's come out of Nikki Haley's mouth, or not come out, when she refused to say slavery was the reason for the Civil War, the example you just gave, the brilliant example of Ron DeSantis and that nonsense. Vivek Ramaswamy is finally out of the race. Thank God for Jesus, because the stuff that this idiot, this fool, this brother was saying is just absurd. Yeah. So I don't see this as a debate, frankly. I look at that debate stage, and I see it more as a pervasive ideology. You would disagree with that assessment?
So, look, I can't disagree these things are happening. I'd push back with you just a little bit on Nikki Haley, on Nikki Haley specifically, right? And it's clear I'm supporting Ambassador Haley when I got out of the race. I think she's our best chance of preventing Donald Trump from becoming the Republican nominee. Mm-hmm. She made it very clear that she should have said slavery was the first thing out of her mouth, right? And she's now you can say, okay, she could be criticized for having to walk those comments back, but she, in subsequent interviews, still to today, she talks about the Civil War was because of slavery. Now, this doesn't change the fact that there's a percentage of too big a percentage. What that percentage is, anything bigger than zero to me is too big. Mm-hmm. That think that the Civil War wasn't about slavery, right? And having to address those kinds of people, it's problematic. And the fact that in 2023, there's still people in the United States of America that think that. Obviously, I don't, right? But But so is this pervasive? Like, I think when people push back on these narratives or criticize the Republican Party, those aren't always highlighted, right? And look, I'm one of the people that do, right? I'm the one that always is trying to talk about why these positions that people espouse are wrong. But when you talk to regular voters, right, like, and this is where I separate when people say the Republican Party, like, what does that actually mean, right? If you want to say, some of the majority of the people that were running for president has had some problem talking about race, then the answer is yes. But when you look at some of the voters and the people that I've interacted with when I was in Congress or interacted with when I was running for the presidency, that's not reflected in that voter, right? Yeah. But this is part of the problem with our system, right? Is why we have gotten so polarized, right? And 20%, in primaries, only about 25% of the country vote, and that's Republican or Democrat. And if you look at Iowa earlier this week, only 14.6% of Republican that people that are registered Republican in Iowa voted, and Trump got 50% of that. So he only got 7.5% of the entire people registered as a Republican in Iowa.
Yeah.
Those small numbers is part of the problem. That's why for most of my career, I try to talk to that bigger group of people to try to encourage them to vote, because then we'd start seeing better people and policies that are more reflective of the entire country.
Let me ask you a quick question about Nikki Haley, then I want to talk about your campaign and a great deal more as we move swiftly through this hour with Will Hurd. Iowa is prologue at this point. We know what Donald Trump did there. You just laid out the numbers quite nicely. New Hampshire is up, in 8 days now, and Nikki Haley is hoping for a major victory in New Hampshire. You and I both know that in New Hampshire, the voters are more moderate. We know that the voters are more educated. So it's a different Republican electorate in New Hampshire than it is in Iowa. What do you think her chances are in New Hampshire?
I think her chances of winning in New Hampshire are very strong, right? The momentum has been building for quite some time. And I always say, when we look at Iowa versus New Hampshire, I think the last Republican to have won Iowa and then won the presidency was George W. Bush in 2020, right? Last election, people that won Iowa was Ted Cruz. Before that, Rick Santorum. Before that, I'm drawing a blank. I think it was like Pat Robertson or something like that, or Pat Buchanan, excuse me. And so New Hampshire is an opportunity. Polling has her basically neck and neck with Donald Trump. She has big endorsements. Chris Sununu, the governor of New Hampshire, very well liked. He's actually the most popular governor in the United States of America.
Of course, DeSantis had the endorsement of the governor in Iowa, and that didn't help.
It didn't help, but it's in New Hampshire is a different scenario, right? And look, even the polling in New Hampshire is different and shows it more competitive than in Iowa. And another example to know how she's building momentum is the fact that Donald Trump is continuing to attack her left and right while in New Hampshire and since literally 2 weeks ago when the momentum was real. So she has a chance. And again, if turnout is good, you'll see positive results. But if turnout is low, then you're going to see kind of the Trump base come out in full force.
Yep. Let me circle back. I lied. I said I want to ask about your campaign. I do. But let me circle back to Iowa right quick because I was reading a story just this morning, a recap of what all the late night comedians had to say on, Monday night and Tuesday night. About the fact that the Iowa caucus was on the same day as Dr. King's holiday, his actual birthday on the 15th. The jokes were just flying because clearly you couldn't ask for two polar opposites, the Iowa caucus for Republicans and celebrating the person I regard as the greatest American this country's ever produced. That happens the same day. That leads me to ask how you assess all this commentary, oftentimes coming from the right, that wants to take Dr. King's language and twist it like a pretzel. They use that line all the time. to suggest that he'd be against DE&I. Bill Ackman, the white brother that took out Claudine Gay at Harvard, made some strange comments on Monday, and others have done the same thing. They take Republicans, that is, not all but too many, take King's words that he would want his children to be judged not by the color of their skin, by the content of their character. They take that and then make this an argument that King would be against diversity, equity, and inclusion, would be diverse any number of programs that they include, of course, affirmative action, now wiped out by the U.S. Supreme Court. But what do you make of persons on the right, Republicans, who take King's words and twist them to advance their own agenda as if he as if he was about ignoring racism rather than addressing it?
Yeah. Yeah, look, I disagree with all that,
right,
obviously. And I think anybody who's ever, read anything about Dr. King recognizes that he would be a proponent of making sure that the inequities that many in our community still see is impacted. And look, one of the ways I try to explain this to people, and Tavis, this is a basic story for you, but something that I'd have to explain. My dad's black, my mom's white, and they moved to San Antonio in 1970. My mom was trying to buy a home. She would go, and then she was like, "Oh, this home's great, but my husband needs to see it." And so when he would show up, the folks would say, "We sold it. It's already got sold, right?" And so my parents basically had to move out to the boonies because it was the only place that would sell to an interracial couple. Guess what? Those weren't the best schools, right? And so I didn't have the access to the best schools in San Antonio because my parents weren't allowed to be in the best communities, right? Or the communities where, I shouldn't say best communities that had the best schools. And now, did that impact me long term? No, but I was the exception rather than necessarily the rule. And I think that is the issue that initiatives like diversity, equity, inclusion are trying to make sure that opportunity is equal for folks, right? And so the misconstruing Dr. King's words is sad. But the sad thing is that not enough people have been taught about what Dr. King really believes, that there's influence from folks that mess up his words.
Yep. Before I get to your presidential campaign this year and last year, for that matter, take me back to your time in Congress. You mentioned being raised in the San Antonio area, and I'm curious, and I suspect the audience is as well. For those who don't remember when you first got elected, remind me right quick how a black Republican got elected in Texas. and I asked that not to be tongue in cheek. I asked that in part because we know that Texas is very conservative in its politics writ large, and no problem there. So I can see the Republican part, but we also see all kinds of racist policies being advanced in Texas from the governor's office on down. So I'm trying to juxtapose those two things. How does a black Republican get elected to Congress out of Texas?
Right. Well, and I represent a 71% Latino district as well. So I had
that's even crazier.
20 miles. I had 800. I appreciate that. I appreciate, some people now after I've been in Congress, they act like it was a fait accompli. It's like, no, it was hard work, Look, so we had 820 miles of the border, 29 counties. It took 10 and a half hours to drive from one corner of the district at 80 miles an hour, which was the speed limit in most of the district. And so very rural, but my hometown of San Antonio was about 50% of the population. And the reason someone like me got elected, right, is the proposition I put out to folks, say, listen, you're not always going to agree with me, but you're going to see me and you're going to know why I'm doing things, right? And at the time, ISIS, I got elected in the 2014 cycle, started in January 2015. ISIS was cutting off people's heads. Right? So terrorism, national security was on the top of people's minds. I spent a decade as an undercover officer in the CIA overseas, stopping terrorists, putting nuclear weapons proliferators out of business, stopping Russians from selling our secrets. And so that resonated with people. And it was truly a 50-50 district, 50% Republican, 50% Democrat. And so that's why they voted me the first time. I got reelected because I did what I said I was going to do. I had more legislations passed as a freshman than any other freshman in the history of Congress. My total count after 6 years is about 23 pieces of legislation, which is more than what most people do in 3 decades. And then people knew I was going to be honest with them. right? And the great thing about representing a 50-50 district, no matter what I did, half the district was upset with me. So it was actually quite freeing. Just be honest. Tell people what the issue is, why I decided this. And I showed up, right? And so, I did more town halls than most members of Congress. And that was documented. And so that's why people appreciate it. And I showed up to communities that had never seen a Republican before. Right. And that's how I was able to win in a district and also take a conservative message to communities that hadn't heard it. Right.
Yeah. You mentioned your time in the CIA, and I want to come to that right quick. A lot I want to cover with you in this hour, brother. I asked you what it was like being a black Republican getting elected in Texas. I now want to ask, what's it like being a black man undercover in the CIA?
Look, honestly, Tavis, was the best job on the planet, right? To be able to work on the most important national security issues of the day. I spent 2 years in D.C. Doing training in essence. That's when 9/11 happened, and I ended up being kind of like I was like the fourth or fifth employee in the unit that ended up prosecuting the war in Afghanistan after 9/11. Then I did 2 years in India, 2 years in Pakistan, 2 years in New York City, where I did interagency work, worked with like New York NYPD, customs, a lot of stuff on counterproliferation. And then I ended my career a year and a half in Afghanistan, where I managed all of our undercover operations. And so, it was like when I left, because in addition to collecting intelligence and stopping bad guys from blowing up our homeland, I also had to brief members of Congress. And I'll be honest, I probably briefed over 200 members, Republicans, Democrats, and I was pretty shocked by the caliber of our elected leaders. And I thought they were doing things that was countering what my friends and I were putting ourselves in harm's way and our lives on the lines to do. And so that's why I left a job I loved and was good at to run for office. But it's funny. My first boss overseas was a very senior black case officer. The senior ops officer, kind of like when you're a first tour, you have the senior grizzled guy there to kind of show you the ropes, right? That was a black officer, and then my best friend at the time was another black officer, and so we had it was again now that was a unique situation, but like I said, it was a great experience. I had great opportunities, and having melanin in your skin allowed you to blend in a lot of places that many of my other colleagues couldn't.
I can see that. I hadn't thought about it in that way, but I can see that. When we come forward, now that you understand a bit more about Will Hurd's backstory, now the penultimate question: why this brother decided to run for president of the United States on the Republican Party ticket? Why run? What did you expect to really accomplish in that arena? We'll talk more broadly about these black Republicans who are, in fact, supporting Donald Trump. What's that about? How does one frame any argument that allows one to support Donald Trump after all that's been said and done? You heard Will Hurd say he's actually supporting Nikki Haley, but I want to get his take on these black folk who are supporting Donald Trump, and again, why he decided to run for president. There's a great deal more to talk about, even beyond that, with Will Hurd, who you're listening to right now, and I'm glad about it, on Tavis Smiley.
What's your quarrel with the world? You're listening to Tavis Smiley.
If you're like me, 60 and retired, making ends meet, especially here at the supermarket and drugstore, is tough. I'm so blessed to have found benefitscheckup.org. It's a free and confidential website from the National Council on Aging that connected me to $1,200 a year in programs that help pay for food, medicine, utilities, and more. Maybe it can help you. benefitscheckup.org.
My daughter was diagnosed with a rare malignant rhabdoid tumor on the spine. They sent her straight to St. Jude. My hope was gone. But when you get there, everyone's like, hey, we're not going to give up. And when you see other people not giving up on your child, that makes all the difference in the world. When I found out I didn't have to pay, I was just grateful. They saved my baby's life.
Finding cures, saving children. Learn more at stjude.org.
I'm Mike Moore. Here's the latest from the Black Information Network. In Georgia, Robert F. Kennedy Jr. recently held a roundtable with black women in Atlanta to discuss pressing issues impacting the black community. He tells the Black Information Network he wants to continue his family's legacy of working towards true equality for all Americans. Kennedy also said having charter schools and school choice will allow the black community to access better education opportunities. He's running as the independent presidential candidate. The central U.S. is bracing for more bitter cold. The National Weather Service says another Arctic cold front will be plunging into the U.S. starting up today and could bring more record-setting cold temperatures. Forecasters say the polar plunge could extend as far south as the Florida Panhandle. And that's the latest. I'm Mike Moore from your 24/7 news source, the Black Information Network and BINnews.com.
We've all felt the impact of rising food prices. For families in poverty, they're facing malnutrition and even death. You can feed a family for a month with your $50 donation to Compassion International. Just text the word radio to 97646.
This is the KBLA Sports Minute with Ray Richardson.
The Clippers got a spectacular performance from Paul George last night to beat Oklahoma City at Crypto.com. They won by 11. PG scored 18 of his season-high 38 points in the fourth quarter. At 26-14, the Clippers are just 2.5 games behind Minnesota for the best record in the Western Conference. The Clippers are 17-4 since November 30th. The Lakers are back in action tonight. They're at home against Dallas. The Lakers are trying to get back to 500. They're one game below. The Chargers are going to have some competition in trying to hire Jim Harbaugh as their next head coach. Harbaugh interviewed with Atlanta on Tuesday. At the moment, 5 other NFL teams are looking for a head coach. The Raiders, Carolina, Washington, Tennessee, and Seattle. Harbaugh's phone is expected to keep on ringing. No debates, no speculation, just the info you need. That's your KBLA Sports Minute. I'm Ray Richardson. More news, opinions, and conversation when we come forward on KBLA Talk 1580.
This is KBLA Talk 1580. Talk radio. That's music to your ears. We're unapologetically progressive. KBLA Talk 1580.
Right now, there are young people across the world facing a tough choice. Continue their dream of education or drop out to help their family put food on the table. You can help change their future in a single moment. See how far your support can go at unbound.org.
We've got a lot to talk about.
Are you interested in catching up on all the latest entertainment news, trending topics, and exciting interviews? I got you. Tune in to The Raw Report with Robin Ayers, Monday through Friday, 6 to 7 p.m. I'm your host, Robin Ayers. Join me every weekday with some of the best entertainment contributors in the business as we break down what's going on, who's got next, and what not to miss. Only on The Raw Report with Robin Ayers.
Unapologetically progressive. KBLA Talk 1580. We've got your black. We've got a lot to talk about.
I'm Reverend Gerald, the life coach. Is someone you love struggling with addiction and mental illness? Is improving your family's health important? Want to leave a legacy that your family can grow? Are you ready to enhance your perception of life experiences? Then wake up weekends at 7 a.m. with Urban Family Focus and get the wisdom, opportunity, resources, and motivation to live your best life. Join the conversation on Urban Family Focus Saturday and Sunday at 7 a.m.
Unapologetically progressive. KBLA Talk 1580. We've got your black.
KBLA Talk 1580 is the exclusive media sponsor of This Light of Ours, activist photographers of the Civil Rights Movement. A dynamic new exhibition on view now at the Skirball Cultural Center in Los Angeles. This Light of Ours showcases more than 150 photos taken by movement insiders from diverse backgrounds that reveal the vital work undertaken by a broad coalition of organizers and everyday people whose collective action changed America. This Light of Ours is one of 3 temporary exhibitions currently on view at the Skirball, which together explore issues related to civil rights, immigration, and pluralism. Tickets and more information for all 3 exhibitions are available at skirball.org. That's skirball.org. SKIRBALL.org.
Let's get back to more of this rich dialogue with Tavis Smiley.
All right, Will Hurd, tell me, I want to jump right into this. Tell me why you decided to run for president on the GOP ticket this time around as a black Republican.
Yeah, sure. Look, I knew I was a dark horse candidate from Jump Street. Right?
No pun intended, right? No pun intended. Dark horse candidate.
Yeah,
okay.
Exactly. Yeah, you're the first
But
to bring that up. Yeah, exactly. But I really do believe and still believe that we're facing a number of generational defining challenges that neither party was really focusing on, or the major candidates in those parties weren't focusing it on. And ultimately, the lane for someone like me that didn't have the resources or the name ID of some of these other folks was I talked about at the beginning of the hour. Only 25%, but it's really about 23% of Americans vote in primaries, but 67% of Americans vote in general elections. And so there's that 44% of people that if you could activate a small percentage of them, you can win. Now, I had experience doing that because that's how I was able to win in Congress. If every Republican voted for me in Texas, in my district, I would still lose because it was actually a left-leaning district. Hillary Clinton had won my seat by, I believe, 4 points. When Beto O'Rourke ran against Ted Cruz, he won my district by 7 points, right? And so I had some experience in bringing new people into not only the primary but in the general election. So that's why I decided to run. And I also know that the GOP, we do worse in the 3 largest growing groups of voters: women with a college degree in the suburbs, black and brown communities, and people under the age of 35. And, I have a history of talking to those groups and doing things that folks in those communities appreciated. So I talked to my wife about this. I wouldn't recommend running for president in your first year of marriage. But I talked to my wife and said, if we want to make sure that we've done everything in our hands to ensure this country is better off for our hopefully future kids or our nieces and nephews and your kids and the future, then we needed to do this. And so that's why I decided to run.
And why do you think you ticked off those groups quite nicely? And ironically, that is the future of this democracy, or this experiment in democracy.
Sure.
That is our future. So it raises the obvious question: why do you think your party has such a horrible time with those groups who make up the future voters?
Because they're only focusing on that primary electorate. So let's take Congress. I think it was 97% of congressional seats in 2022 were decided in the primary. And in that election cycle, I think on average in a congressional seat, and this is an average number, changes depending on which seat it is, about 70,000 people vote on average in a congressional primary. So that means 35,000 people on average were deciding who 97% of our members of Congress. And those are the most extreme elements within the Republican Party and the Democratic Party. Mm-hmm. So a majority of elected officials only talk to those people because those are the only people that that come out to vote and keep them in office. This is one reason why the GOP has not won a national. We haven't won the popular vote, the national popular vote, in 2 decades. The last person to do that was George W. Bush. So that's why I think the GOP we have opportunities, right? Because and again, I don't mean to get into a debate with someone as smart as you, Tavis, but the Democratic Party in many places have taken for granted black and brown communities. And so if we take a message, and one is like particularly education, instead of being known for burning books, let's talk about increasing opportunities for black and brown kids. And if you take Texas as an example, and this gets into the whole school choice issue, Texas did a recent longitudinal study of all the all kids that have gone to a charter school, eliminated the learning divide amongst kids on all races, right? And so why aren't we doing more of this? Now, I also believe we should have competition in schools. Public schools are important, and public schools should have the same rules that charter schools do, but don't prevent charter schools, because that creates competition in the educational space, and that provides better outcomes for our kids. That evidence is clear. That's why in Texas a lot of Democratic elected officials are there. So this is something that we should be leading on, but we don't, because too many people focus on just that sliver of primary vote.
So let me say two things right quick. One, you will get no debate from me. However smart I may or may not be, and that's debatable, you will get no debate from me on the comment you made about Democrats taking black folk for granted. There's no debate there at all. I regard myself unapologetically as a progressive, but the Democratic Party has for too long, I think, taken black voters for granted, and the Republican Party has flat out ignored African-American voters. I raised this question. I was on CNN the other night, and I raised this question in answer to a question. I raised this frame the other night on CNN, and it was simply this, that time and time again, the nation has turned to black folk to save this democracy from itself. We've done it in every war. They turned to us to save the country during the Civil War. Watch this now. Negroes were yet enslaved, and yet we fought in the Civil War to save this country from itself. The war was fought, Nikki Haley, over slavery, and yet we signed up to save this democracy while we were yet enslaved. We did it in World War I and World War II. We defeat Hitler. They can't do it without us. And on the way out of Europe, black soldiers have to sit on the train behind Nazi war criminals. We saved America and saved the world, frankly, then. In the last election, whatever one thinks of Joe Biden wouldn't have had the Democratic nomination, much less be president, if black folk in South Carolina, particularly black women, had not come to rescue him. And now black folk are being called upon again to save this democracy from authoritarianism and from anarchy. And that's why Joe Biden is pushing so hard, trying to shore up these black votes. He can't do it without us. And the question I simply raised the other night is, what do Negroes ever or finally get for saving this democracy time and time and time again? We can't get reparations. We can't get voting rights passed. We can't get meaningful police reform passed. Don't get me started. We have saved this democracy so many times. We keep fighting to redeem the soul of this nation, and yet we seem to get nothing for all the times we rescue this democracy. Now, I'm talking to the country writ large, but in that frame are Democrats who too often take black voters for granted, but Republicans flat out ignore us, so I ain't happy with nobody, Will Hurd.
Hey, look, I agree, and that's why, in business, that's called an opportunity, because a lot of people feel your way, right? I would say more people feel the way you do than don't. And that's why I've tried to continue to push within the party that I have identified, because, again, another reason why people aren't coming out to vote is because we're not inspiring them. Like, we don't have elected that are talking about issues that they actually care about, right? And so I can't disagree with you on that. And the thing that's fresh, and this is why people are frustrated. Like, I go back to the George Floyd murder. And I was still in Congress at that time. I was the first Republican to come out and speak about this. I think I was one of two Republicans that actually went and attended a march in solidarity with the community about what happened. Mm-hmm. And what was frustrating in Congress, an opportunity to pass what I would think was some very basic elements of police reform, was prevented from happening because many of my friends on the Democratic side were afraid of some of the police unions and pushback on the police unions, right? Mm-hmm. And then I could talk about immigration with the Latino community, right? Like, I was involved in the last real bipartisan effort to have an ability to streamline legal immigration, take care of dreamers, do all these kinds of things. But that was legislation at the time that we were trying to get passed by a Republican speaker.
Right. Hey, to cut you off, Will, I'm just watching my clock here. Let me let you finish that point when we come forward, I promise. On your issue of education, let me just say this right quick before I lose sight of this. I'm all for school choice. I just want all schools to be choice. You take my point, right? School choice is fine. But why and how do we why can't we rather make all schools choice? For as long as we are in this country, the majority of our children, namely black and brown, are going to be in public schools. So don't run past that reality. If our kids are going to be in public schools, don't talk to me about school choice if you ain't prepared to do something to make all schools choice for all of our children. What would Will heard when we come forward on Tavis Smiley?
Interrogating and unpacking. That's what we do around here. You're listening to Tavis Smiley.
What is dedication?
My biggest fear in the middle of my addiction was that my kids wouldn't have a father. And I started thinking, you know what? This isn't my story. I definitely had to become a better man to be a better father. It's important to me that my kids are empowered and truly believe that if they can think it, they can do it.
That's dedication. Visit fatherhood.gov to hear more. Brought to you by the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services and the Ad Council.
Joey from Vermont, a farmer trying to get through the winter. Adriana from South Carolina, a single mother living paycheck to paycheck. Liam from Ohio, an injured father struggling to provide for his family. Hi, I'm Shanola Hampton, and I support the Feeding America network of food banks because they help provide over 6 billion meals to people in need each year. Learn more at feedingamerica.org.
Don't settle for bumps, ingrowns, and itch due to dry skin. Venus for Pubic Hair and Skin is here with the only razor and regimen specifically designed for your pubic area, featuring a razor with the patented irritation defense bar and skincare regimen that is dermatologist and gynecologist tested. Venus helps protect your pubic skin from shave irritation. Visit GilletteVenus.com to learn more about our full regimen of products.
Skincare is self-care, and with daily beauty steals of 50% off during Ulta Beauty's Love Your Skin event, I can find everything I need to make loving my skin a daily practice, from brands like Osea, Lancome, and Tula. And I can shop weekly skin and wellness deals of 30% off more must-have brands. Plus, see what's new from brands like Bubble and in select stores, Sol de Janeiro and Ulla Henriksen. Hurry, event ends January 20th. Shop in store, online, or try pickup today. Ulta Beauty. The possibilities are beautiful. Conditions apply.
Eggs are a staple in our diets, and there's only one egg with more delicious farm-fresh taste plus superior nutrition. Eggland's Best. With more vitamins, including 6 times more vitamin D and 10 times more vitamin E, plus 25% less saturated fat than ordinary eggs. Available in so many delicious varieties. Classic, cage-free, and organic. Eggland's Best. Better taste, better nutrition, better eggs.
You can do it all by yourself, baby girl. What's your name? Let me talk to you. Let me buy you a drink.
Spilled your drink? Quick, the quicker picker-upper. Bounty picks up spills quicker. And each sheet is 2 times more absorbent, so you can use less than the leading ordinary brand. So you can get back to your night. Bounty, the quicker picker-upper.
Sounds different, huh? This is Tavis Smiley.
Well, heard, I'm watching my clock here, and I'm getting tight on time. I cut you off. I didn't mean to, didn't want to. You were making a point about immigration. Let me just ask you so we can wrap this real quick and talk about these black folks supporting Trump. How do you think this immigration issue is going to cut this time around? Because Democrats are moving on this issue. Republicans are pressing on this issue. The president is going to end up signing something. But ultimately, you're in Texas. You ran a district that was overwhelmingly Latino. How is this issue of immigration going to cut with Latino voters this year, you think?
Sure. And last point on the education piece, when you went out, look, one of the things that we need to do on take care of our teachers, and governors need to do a better job. Republican and Democratic governors, we need to be paying our teachers better. But I agree with you. Public schools are important. But when it comes to immigration and how Latino voters are going to respond, so the communities along the border, about the Texas-Mexico border, these are supermajority Latino districts, and guess what? This is a public safety issue. And communities have been dealing with this issue now for almost 5 years. The current crisis began under Donald Trump. Now, President Biden made it significantly worse with bad policies, and we can get into that. But when you look at why is Joe Biden's numbers in a head-to-head with Donald Trump, why is he losing in a head-to-head with Donald Trump, and why is he losing in a head-to-head with Nikki Haley? It's because of this issue of immigration and the border crisis. And so, President Biden should be pushing and looking for some kind of resolution, because I think that's going to benefit him, electorally.
Okay. When we come forward in our remaining moments with Will Hurd, I want to go right to the issue that I've been teeing up a couple minutes now and haven't had a chance to get to. But we'll close on this note, and that is these black folk who are, in fact, supporting Donald Trump. How does one justify that? In what frame are you in that allows you in this election to support Donald Trump as president of these United States? Will Hurd dropped out of the race and endorsed Nikki Haley. And I got even issues with that, but that's just me. But I really don't understand how anybody black in this election could support Donald Trump. We'll talk about that when we come forward in our remaining moments with Will Hurd on Tavis Smiley.
For all the freedom-loving folk, this is Tavis Smiley.
I feel like freedom.
If you're like me, 60 and retired, making ends meet, especially here at the supermarket and drugstore, is tough. I'm so blessed to have found benefitscheckup.org. It's a free and confidential website from the National Council on Aging that connected me to $1,200 a year in programs that help pay for food, medicine, utilities, and more. Maybe it can help you. benefitscheckup.org.
My daughter was diagnosed with a rare malignant rhabdoid tumor on the spine. They sent her straight to St. Jude. My hope was gone. But when you get there, everyone's like, hey, we're not going to give up. And when you see other people not giving up on your child, that makes all the difference in the world. When I found out I didn't have to pay, I was just grateful. They saved my baby's life.
Finding cures, saving children. Learn more at stjude.org.
KBLA Talk 1580. We've got a lot to talk about.
KBLA Talk 1580 believes in community empowerment through the arts. Tia Chucha Central Cultural is on a mission to transform community in the Northeast San Fernando Valley and beyond through ancestral knowledge, the arts, literacy, and creative engagement. The Northeast San Fernando Valley has a population of about 500,000, the size of the city of Oakland, yet it has no bookstores, art galleries, or full-fledged cultural spaces until Tia Chuchas opened its doors in 2001. Founded by renowned poet and activist Luis Rodriguez, Tia Chuchas Cultural Center provides a year-round free or low-cost arts and literacy bilingual intergenerational programming in mural painting, music, dance, writing, visual arts, healing art sessions, and healing talking circles. Activities also include Mexica, Aztec dance, indigenous cosmology, philosophy, and 2 weekly open mic nights, one in Spanish, the other in English. In addition, they host author readings, film screenings, and art exhibits. To express yourself, heal yourself, attend an event, or volunteer, please visit www.tiachucha.org. That's TIACHUCHA.org. This is a community call to action from KBLA Talk 1580.
If you love to travel, Capital One has a rewards credit card that's perfect for you. With Venture X, earn unlimited double miles on everything you buy and turn everyday purchases into extraordinary trips. Plus, receive premium travel benefits like access to over 1,300 airport lounges where you just check in and chill out. Open up a world of possibilities with Capital One. What's in your wallet?
Terms apply. Lounge access is subject to change. See CapitalOne.com for details.
Ready to re-examine your assumptions and expand your inventory of ideas? More of Tavis Smiley coming your way right now.
Will Hurd, I got 4 tight minutes here, and I want to wrap with a couple of things here. So there's a big story in the New York Times today about the paradox that the Biden administration is wrestling with. On the one hand, they want to run against Trump again because they believe that Trump gives them the best chance to win again. On the other hand, he's the guy they're most scared of losing to because of the existential threat that he represents. It's a paradox for the Biden people. That said, how can anybody black in this election support Donald Trump, to your mind?
Well, it's a hard question for me to answer because I don't support Donald Trump, right? I've never voted for him. I never will. I was one of few Republicans back in 2016 that didn't support him, right? And so that's a hard question for me to answer.
Larry Elder, who also was in this race with you as a black Republican, Larry Elder is supporting Donald Trump.
I know, and again, so the argument many of them are going to make, right? And again, I am not supportive of Donald Trump, so this is why it's a hard question for me to answer. Is that the policies, right? For people's 401ks were a little bit better. When you look at capital formation for black businesses was higher under Donald Trump than it had been in the past, right? Mm-hmm. Like people want to focus on those elements, right? But for me, mm-hmm. I can't subscribe to the fact that I believe the ends do not justify the means.
Right.
And what many of these people are saying is that the ends do justify the means. And so I have a problem with that.
Yeah. What do you think? I'm sorry. What do you think the Supreme Court ultimately is going to do about two things? One, whether or not he belongs on these ballots in these states across the nation. He's not been found guilty of anything as yet. But how will they decide on that? And what do you think they're going to say about whether or not one who's engaged in insurrection is qualified or disqualified from running for public office?
Well, I think on both of those that the courts are probably are going to rule and say that he can't be kept off the ballot because if he hasn't been tried for those things, who is to make that a judge or even an administrative clerk, right? In many states, the Secretary of State that's making decisions on ballot issues is appointed, is not voted on, and so should that person have the ability to keep somebody off the ballots, right? Yeah. And so I don't think the courts are going to rule that way. Mm-hmm. And ultimately, the best way to deal with Donald Trump, whether it's in the Republican Party or in a general election, is to beat him at the ballot box. Yeah. And that's why more people need to show up and get engaged, and more people need to get engaged in voting. California is going to have a huge impact in this election on Super Tuesday. And guess what? There are ways for people to make sure the Republican Party has someone other than Donald Trump, and you can still participate in the other elections and vote for Democrats.
I've got 45 seconds left. How does one spend one's days post-presidential race?
Well, look, I'm right now. I'm probably going to get back in investment banking. I'm involved in artificial intelligence. I used to be on the board of OpenAI. So I finally took my wife on a honeymoon. So that was was a good thing.
Happy wife, happy life. Happy wife, happy life.
Exactly. I've learned that, and I might be doing a follow up to my book. I wrote a book called American Reboot a couple of years ago. Mm-hmm. And so I'm working on another one.
Will Hurd, good to have you on this program. I appreciate your insights. I am never afraid to go toe-to-toe with people who see things differently than I. I say all the time on this program that it's about re-examining your assumptions, expanding your inventory of ideas, never afraid to engage in these dialogues, and neither are you. And for that, I am grateful. Thank you for your time, sir.
Thank you. Take care.
Good to have you on. Take care. More of Tavis Smiley when we come forward in our next hour. What's up with all the hate on Dr. King? You're listening to Tavis Smiley.
KBLA 1580 Santa Monica.
I'm Mike Moore. Here's the latest from the Black Information Network. New York balanced the budget without layoffs, tax hikes, or major disruptions to city services despite obstacles like the growing migrant crisis.